He sat at the large, weathered wooden desk in his home office, the weight of purpose pressing heavily on his shoulders. The past 2 weeks had unraveled in ways he could never have anticipated, and now, with a grim determination, he meticulously reviewed his checklist for the 10th time that morning. Every detail of his plan had to be flawless. Leaning back in his chair, he closed his eyes and let the memories of how it all began wash over him. 12 days earlier, during a business trip to Memphis, he had sent his first email to a woman named Ashley. She was part of a globally recognized website designed for those seeking affairs, and her profile had caught his attention immediately. The headline read, "Sweet and married, looking to explore." Ashley described herself as a 48-year-old woman long married, who had devoted over half her life to being a wife and mother. She had poured herself into her family, friends, and community, but now she yearned for something more, intimate experiences beyond the confines of her marriage. Her honesty struck him, and he introduced himself as Mike, a 39-year-old senior project manager in the computer hardware industry. He explained that he too was married, intended to stay married, and traveled frequently, often bringing him near her area. He suggested they meet discreetly for purely physical encounters. After sending the message, he briefly scrolled through other profiles but found none as compelling as Ashley's. Satisfied, he headed to the nearly empty hotel bar for a nightcap before bed. The next day was a whirlwind of technical meetings, and by evening he was dining at an upscale seafood restaurant with 2 clients, leaving the stress of the day behind. Back at his hotel, bourbon in hand, he changed into workout clothes, powered up his laptop, and found Ashley's reply waiting for him. She thanked him for his thoughtful introduction, admitting that most messages she received were trivial. She seemed genuinely intrigued by him. Ashley revealed that she had been married for over 20 years to a busy construction executive who traveled often. It was during his absences that she sought out other men. A successful real estate agent with a hectic schedule, she had joined the site after her youngest child left for college, inspired in part by the stories of a divorced friend. She explained that she only dated married men, preferring the mutual assurance of secrecy should anything leak. The fact that he was from a different city appealed to her. Local partners made her nervous. Ashley confessed that she had received thousands of messages since joining the site a year earlier. She had met 8 men for coffee, leading to 6 affairs, 3 brief encounters and 3 that lasted several months. She posed 4 questions to him. Did he have another lover? What frustrated him most about online dating? Was this his first affair? And what qualities did he seek in a partner? She emphasized that building trust through email was crucial. She wouldn't jump into bed without getting to know him first. Yet, despite her caution, she promised she was worth the effort and hoped to continue their conversation. He chose not to respond immediately, not wanting to appear overly eager. After reading her message, he headed to the hotel gym, running on the treadmill, lifting weights, and doing pull-ups before returning to his room and settling into bed early. The next morning, he flew home from Memphis, stopping briefly at his office to handle urgent tasks. That evening, he and his wife, Bonnie, went to a local bistro with Bonnie's friend Kelly and Kelly's latest companion. The dinner was delicious, but the company tested his patience. He had never liked Kelly or her sly demeanor. On the drive home, Bonnie, feeling playful, knelt on the front seat and unzipped his pants. She told him to keep his eyes on the road, her teasing spark igniting the moment. Bonnie had a way of turning any situation into something unforgettable. As they drove, he let one hand roam along her toned legs, remarking that she had apparently forgotten her underwear. Once they arrived home and shut the garage door, he lifted her onto the car's hood, kissing her hungrily. Bonnie whispered for him to use his hands, her voice filled with longing. He explored her body with deliberate care, ensuring she felt fully cherished. After she caught her breath, he gently guided her to turn around, encouraging her to lean over the car. She responded instantly, their connection intensifying as they lost themselves in each other. Eventually, they collapsed together, breathing heavily in the enclosed darkness of the garage. The next morning, he woke early and brought a pot of coffee to his home office, determined to tackle paperwork from the week before. Bonnie slept in, confident he would handle the morning routine. He opened his email to reply to Ashley, apologizing for the delay and explaining that travel and a date night had kept him busy. He suggested they both agree not to worry if responses took a day or 2, given their shared need for discretion. Then he addressed her questions. He had no current lovers but had juggled multiple small projects recently, leaving him short on time. He had started having affairs 7 years earlier, totaling 16 encounters. Each new project opened possibilities but also brought frustrations when people vanished or lied. His biggest irritation, he admitted, was liars who promised further meetings only to disappear. What he loved most, he confessed, was variety. Different partners brought fresh experiences, from playful exploration with toys to even inviting extra participants. What he sought now was a long-term affair with a married woman who could meet a couple of times a month, someone who showed restraint in public but indulged his dominant side in private. He closed by asking Ashley about the thrilling nature of her 3 long-term relationships, feeling satisfied with his honesty. He signed off, wishing her a good weekend and promising more soon. The rest of his weekend was busy yet typical. Saturday morning was spent tending to yard work, followed by a neighborhood barbecue that evening with Bonnie. Later they undressed and made love. Sunday followed their usual routine: church, a workout at the country club, and a shared breakfast in the members' dining room. Bonnie spent the afternoon tidying the house while he did grocery shopping, preparing for the upcoming week. Late Sunday evening, when Bonnie went to bed, he entered his home office again to check his email. Sure enough, Ashley had replied. She agreed to the communication ground rules and shared that flaky people and liars were her biggest frustrations as well. As the morning light filtered through the kitchen windows, he sat at the table, his hands wrapped around a warm mug of coffee. The weekend had passed in its usual rhythm: dinners with Bonnie, rounds of golf, church on Sunday, but his mind was elsewhere. The past 2 weeks had unraveled into something electric, something forbidden. And now, the moment he'd been anticipating was finally here. At 8:10 a.m., the faint sound of a closing bathroom door upstairs signaled Bonnie's presence, a reminder of the life he was about to step away from, if only for a few stolen hours. He exhaled slowly, running through his mental checklist. Everything was in place. The plan had been made. Ashley would be waiting. The sharp click of heels echoed down the hallway as Bonnie entered the kitchen, moving with effortless grace toward the coffee pot. She stirred in sugar absent-mindedly, turning around to find him sitting there, watching her. She jolted, startled. "I thought you'd already left for the airport," she said, recovering quickly, though her voice held an edge of something else, discomfort perhaps. He took a slow sip of coffee, holding her gaze. "Trip's been cancelled." A moment passed. He didn't need to spell it out. He was watching, waiting. Her expression shifted, ever so slightly. A flicker of something in her eyes, panic, uncertainty, before she smoothed it over, disguising it with a practiced ease. Then she noticed her phone, her laptop, both missing from their usual charging spot. Her fingers tightened around her coffee mug. Her breath hitched. For the first time in weeks, it was Bonnie's turn to feel the weight of an unexpected shift. Bonnie's voice was sharp with anger as she demanded to know where her electronics were. Her phone, her laptop, gone from their usual spots. She stared at him, waiting for an answer. But he didn't give her one. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying her with an unsettling calm. "Why aren't you wearing underwear?" The question landed between them like a stone dropped into deep water. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then she scoffed, shaking her head. "That's ridiculous." He wasn't fooled. "Lift your skirt," he said simply. Her face flared red. "Mike? Or would you like me to do it?" The silence stretched between them. Then finally she exhaled, dropping her gaze. "It was just for a little thrill," she mumbled. He let the words hang in the air, his expression unmoved. "Just a thrill?" His voice was quiet, edged with something cold. "You lied about it." She shifted, her body tense. "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that," he countered. "How often do you lie, Bonnie?" The conversation had turned sharp, each word a knife peeling away at the illusion she had clung to. She straightened, her frustration giving way to fury. "Give me my phone and my laptop. Now." "They're locked away." Her breath hitched. "What?" "You're free to go," he said smoothly, leaning back in his chair. "But your devices stay in my safe." Panic flickered across her face. She was no longer in control, no longer able to talk her way out. He had her cornered. Bonnie hesitated before sinking into a chair, her hands gripping the table's edge. Her voice cracked as she pleaded, "Tell me what this is about." He met her gaze, expression unreadable. "I lied too," he said after a beat. She frowned. "What?" "I lied about still loving you." The color drained from her face. "You," she swallowed hard. "You don't love me anymore?" His stare was steady, unyielding. "I'm not sure love can disappear completely," he admitted. "But if it's still there, it's barely breathing." She tried to recover, tried to reel him back in. "Darling." "No," he cut her off, his voice firm. "No terms of endearment. Call me Mike." She flinched as if struck. A bitter smile played on his lips. I won't call you Bonnie anymore. She blinked, confused. I think Ashley suits you better. Bonnie's breath came shallowly, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Then realization dawned and her entire body tensed. A slow horror settled over her features. Her mouth opened, but before she could speak, she lurched forward, her stomach heaving. Coffee and the remnants of her last meal spilled across the table, soaking her skirt. He didn't move. He simply watched. You should take a shower, he suggested coolly. She clutched her stomach, her breathing uneven before stumbling from the room. As she disappeared upstairs, he turned back to his coffee, taking a slow sip before heading into his office. The house fell silent. 90 minutes passed. When Bonnie reappeared, she had changed into jeans and a t-shirt, her hair damp from the shower. She looked smaller now, as though she had lost some invisible armor. It was only flirting, she whispered. Online. That's all it was. I never met anyone. He scoffed. I saw the photos. Tears welled in her eyes. What photos? 6 different men, he said. 6 different hands on you. She bent forward, sobbing, her shoulders shaking violently. He let her cry. Let her feel it. Then, when her tears quieted, he reached into the drawer beside him and slid a stack of papers across the desk. Bonnie's breath hitched. A divorce petition. If you don't sign now, he said, his voice measured, you'll be served. Her hands hovered over the papers, trembling. No, she whispered. Mike, please? He ignored her plea. The vacation fund is now a down payment on an apartment in downtown West Hartford, he continued. A place with space for the girls when they visit me. No, she sobbed, shaking her head violently. No, we can fix this. We can? This isn't fixable. Desperation clung to her words as she tried again. You travel all the time. I was lonely. The house feels empty. You cheated, he said bluntly. She flinched as if he had struck her. Stop, she whispered. Please? You called yourself an adulteress in those messages to Mike? His voice was like steel. I'm just calling you what you are. Bonnie's entire body trembled. She could barely breathe. Then the final blow. Paul Kaplan's wife called me. Her face drained of color, horror setting in. She suspected something, he continued. So I hired a private investigator. Bonnie's lip quivered. I've seen everything. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her body sagging as if she had been stripped of all strength. I also know about the other 4 men, he added. And I'll be providing proof to their wives. She shook violently, realization crashing over her. Mike, she whispered. You should start thinking about what you'll say to them, he said, watching her. And to our daughters. Our parents. Our friends. She sobbed. He didn't comfort her. He simply watched as she fell apart. 5 months passed. A crisp Friday evening found him at the airport, returning home to his new life. He hadn't planned to stop anywhere, but hunger pulled him toward a trendy downtown restaurant. He sat at the bar, finishing his meal and enjoying the last sip of Merlot when a familiar voice interrupted his solitude. Mike. He turned. Kelly. She hesitated, then exhaled. I've wanted to talk to you. He nodded, waiting. Kelly shifted uncomfortably. I feel like I played a part in all of this, she admitted. I told Bonnie stories. About affairs. I think it made her curious. He studied her for a long moment before shaking his head. Bonnie made her own choices. Kelly nodded, but her expression remained troubled. She's struggling. Therapy, guilt, everything. It's been, she sighed. Hard. He said nothing. Then after a pause she looked at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Is there even the slightest chance you could forgive her? A gentle hand touched his shoulder before he could answer. He turned. Jana. She leaned in and kissed him, soft but certain. His answer was clear before he even spoke. Kelly, Jana said with quiet confidence. There's no hope. Her hand tightened in his. He's mine. Kelly's expression shifted, understanding settling in. She offered a subdued smile. Mike stood, taking Jana's hand. Together, they stepped out into the night, leaving behind the ghost of a past he no longer wished to revisit. He had clung to his marriage out of habit, out of a sense of duty. But deception had rotted its foundation, and when it crumbled, he found something else waiting for him. Something real. As they walked into the city lights, he felt only one thing. Freedom.